we'll be talking about AI-powered products and product-powered AI. A bit about myself. So as you saw earlier in the intro, my name is Guy. I'm from Thoughtworks, Spain, based in Barcelona. It's also around lunch here, so I hope there's nothing like in between my teeth or anything. I'll just stand a bit further from the camera. And I'd like to start with what brought me into this investigation. So most of us, I imagine, will have heard about more and more AI projects and different types of products in the fields we work in. We know there's developing technology. We know it's being made more accessible. We know it's more and more common. But AI, really an AI in our different products is not such a new buzzword anymore. It's something that I believe will be expected for us to work with in the very near future if we're not working with it already. So as we jump in, I would like to ask you with this first poll, how much experience or what levels of experience we have with AI in our different projects. And we'll get a feel for a bit what kind of experiences we have in our audience today. Okay, excellent. All right, thanks for those who have participated. As you can see, so it looks like many of us haven't worked with AI just yet. But as we said, I think we'll probably be expected to do it quite soon. So we know there's quite a lot of growing investment and fastly growing investment in AI. You can see in this graph, the investment in AI products by different companies in 2021 compared to 2020. 2021 here is the dark blue. And you can see a significant jump in companies dedicating more and more budget to AI, whether it's research, development, different types of products and projects. So there's huge investment and huge growth in both the public and private sectors. An interesting thing in this survey as well is that all company sizes are represented. It's not just large enterprises, also small, medium businesses are working more and more with AI. And of course, it can be applied, and we're seeing it applied in just about every business sector you can imagine, whether it's travel, logistics, and dynamic pricing, and data management and customer support, just about everywhere. And all this makes me think, as business analyst, product manager, or product thinker in general, what do I need to do? What do I need to know for when AI starts playing a part in my projects? What is different about products that have AI involved? How can I, or how should I adapt my product process? And all these questions, they led me to different parts of investigation. So in today's talk, we'll also have 4 stories to get a feel of what it's really like, with some examples from the ground. But first of all, there's one thing we need to clarify before, and that is what are we talking about when we talk about AI? So first of all, I'll stick to this kind of definition. I won't go into all the different debates of different levels and different definitions of AI. Let's focus on, let's say, the characteristics that are relevant for our work as product thinkers. So one baseline definition of AI, or most AI products that we see today, is a system that performs a task without being explicitly programmed. Okay? You don't give your model specific instructions on how to execute a task, such as estimating the price of a house, but it rather learns that information. It infers different rules and relationships from data that you feed it. So one example we can see here, this is a list of houses, and we can see the location, their square footage, how many rooms they have, etc., and their prices. So this is used to train, okay, this is what we referred to as the training data. You give it to an AI system, and you train it to look at all the different data points in relation to the price, and it will figure out how these data points, how these factors connect to create the price, and it'll create a model to estimate the prices of future houses that maybe you don't know the price of. And so that's kind of the basic two components or two sides of it. Okay, so you input data. In most AI projects or AI implementations that we're seeing today, this is kind of the model that's being followed. You give it data with, let's say, labels. Okay, this is kind of the predictions you want to train it on. And you get predictions. In this case, you can feed it a new house and get an estimated price for it. Okay, so those are the, let's say, the two main sides of AI, the characteristics that are interesting for us as product thinkers. Now, taking the same concept, okay, you can feed, rather than a list of or a data table of houses, you can feed your AI system thousands of images made up of all these pixels and train it to recognize faces. You can feed it information about text in different languages, right? And train it to perform machine translation. You can feed it different elements of data tracking different systems and treat it and train it to recognize anomalies. This is used often in security, fraud detection, etc. And what they have in common are these components. Now, what do these components mean for us when we're working with products? What's different about our work versus, let's say, developing some enterprise software, a web application, a mobile app? So the first thing is working with data, and I'm sure just about everyone has heard this, right? Almost the prerequisite or one of the most important conditions or inputs for a valuable AI system with good predictions is data, right? And this is indeed one of the biggest challenges we're seeing across all the different projects. It's not about getting just the quantity of data. Of course, you need usually, depending on the application, a lot of data to train the system to get good predictions, but it's also about the structure, the completeness, and the right format of the data. But as we saw, it's only one side of the equation. You input the data, and then there are many technical decisions to be made on which types of algorithms you use, which types of models you use, how you set the parameters, and these are all AI-specific decisions, right? We won't find them in mobile apps or web apps, etc. Now, how can we tackle these? How can we integrate these into our process as product thinkers to make great products that are powered by AI? So first of all, I think one challenge we'll talk about is how to make it a product. Right? First, well, you might have these different experiments going on, different types of tools, etc. How can we connect that into a flow that delivers value, like in the talks we saw this morning? Second, we'll dive into that question of these different decisions we want to make about the model's parameters and all sorts of technical implementation things that could affect how our product would work and how we can iterate on it. Other than that, we also have decisions which are not strictly technical, right? In this case, we might get predictions and we need to define how good they should be, right, to be useful for me. So there are more business decisions that would be specific to working with AI. And at the end, of course, we'll also talk about this data challenge. Okay, so yeah, so these are kind of the lots of questions that came up. There's obviously many more, and I'll also be looking forward to your questions on other topics and how we keep learning on this. But then my question to myself is, okay, what do I do with this? Right? I know AI is coming. I'm working on some AI experiments, and I'm expecting more to come in the projects I'm working on. How do I tackle these challenges? So my solution, well, or my proposed answer so far, is to talk to people that have been working on different types of projects. So we'll see and we'll get a feel, hopefully, for what it really looks like. How do we make these decisions? And what can we learn from experience of people that are already doing this, so that when our time comes to dive in to AI-powered products, we will have learned these lessons and be able to deliver value in a more effective way. All right, so that's what brought us here. Let's talk about these different areas or these different experiences with AI-powered products. And I'm going to start with something that sounds almost silly, I think, especially for this audience. But AI-powered products are products. They have to serve a specific user or customer need. And I guess it sounds obvious, right? But of course, as with every new technology we see, lots of hype around it, people coming to us and saying, oh, I want something with AI, without necessarily thinking if that's the best solution for the current need we have. So we can have different experiments, different models that test and make predictions about delivery routes and house prices and things. But then what do you do with them? Does it really connect to a specific customer flow? Does it answer a need that we validated? How does it fit into the existing customer journey? So let's take a good look at an example, I think, of this work done well. We're going to talk about the work of Shimoku. So Shimoku is a Barcelona-based startup that actually share an office in the building with Thoughtworks Barcelona, for those of you who still remember what an office is. And Shimoku has several AI-based products with different value propositions. Most of their work is targeted right now small, medium enterprises, e-commerce, online shops, and they can use different prediction models to help predict customer churn, okay, which customers are you likely to lose. Another one is to qualify leads or which customers are likely to convert or to buy more. And you can even predict if your demand planning matches your stock planning. Are you going to have enough stock to meet the demand? Now, each one of these applications is actually quite sophisticated in terms of the AI behind it. There's several layers, several different processes to make it work. In my head, I kind of imagine this matrix-like screen with all the different numbers and all the data flying around. And if you look into the code, it's kind of like that, but that's not what the customer sees, right? The customer ultimately sees in this dashboard 4 numbers. Like with a very specific, clear information, you are at risk of losing these customers with this value. So this is not about showing like all the sophistication of AI. It's specifically about showing what the customer is expecting to see and what they can do with it. Okay, so I think this is an excellent example. Okay, so your AI, it creates this prediction. It's a pretty sophisticated, pretty cool implementation, but ultimately, the goal is to inform the decision and meet that customer need. Now, in the case of Shimoku, they also don't stop there. Okay? So we saw earlier as well in a talk about data mesh, a version of this cycle, right? You take data, you generate information, extract insights from it, but then the next step is action, right? So just having the prediction is not necessarily valuable in itself, and we can see that also here. So we can predict not only a customer is going to churn, but the system will propose what action you can take and actually integrate it right there in the interface. So it can be integrated with your CRM, your mailing system. The action is right there for you. So offering the value and giving you closing that loop. Actually, they go even one step further, right? So like after the action, we saw the cycle that feeds back into the data, and you can actually, in a separate dashboard, see the actual results of the action and get a clear measurement of the value we're given. This is the opportunities and the money that you saved or that you gained because of decisions that were supported by this AI. So it's clearly connecting to their customer flow and even giving them a very tangible measure of what value they got from using this AI-powered product. Okay, so I think this was a nice example of bringing AI into the customer's world. Now, I think for us, like this is a very good point to start, but to be able to deliver that, as we saw, there are different types of technical questions. There are many different types of models and algorithms, and we can spend a lot of time adjusting that and figuring out how to train or retrain the system or get different types of predictions from it, etc. Now, all this can take time, and we don't always have time or endless amount of time to deliver something, especially in critical cases like, okay, I think I'm actually the first person in the conference this week to mention COVID-19, which is which is a bit late, but yeah, where it's I think an excellent example in this case of a very urgent need. So in this case, I'd like to take you also to Barcelona. In this case, we're talking about Hospital del Mar, hospital here, and I have a friend working there, and they were working in the hospital in March 2020, so right at the height of the first wave of the pandemic. The emergency rooms were saturated, doctors were overworked, sleep deprived, and there was very, very little information about COVID-19, and well, one of the key challenges was being able to diagnose COVID-19. Now, in this case, the team saw an opportunity to perhaps accelerate this process. At the time, the PCR test, they took 72 hours, sometimes even a few days to give a result. And of course, that wasn't fast enough to be able to control the pandemic. And they seized an opportunity with readily available data they had about chest x-rays, right? So they hypothesized, looking at chest x-rays, we could use AI to generate an immediate estimation of how probable this patient is infected with COVID-19. And I'm going to skip right to the end of this story. They were able to develop this system. They were able to integrate it in the production system of the hospital. You can see it here in the patient management software. And this whole process of hypothesis development, testing, and integration took 4 weeks. Right? So 4 weeks of overworked, sleep-deprived doctors and software engineers were able to deliver this and deliver that very clear value quickly, and also keep evolving quite rapidly over time. So this in itself, I think, was an impressive achievement. And then, I asked them, how did you do this? And one of the key insights, I think, that we can learn from in our own projects, maybe even if they're not questions of life and death here, is working on the basis of existing research, best practices, and examples that are similar to your domain. So in this case, I don't think we didn't find any other projects, kind of trying to diagnose COVID through X-rays, but there are similar implementations that have been studied and refined quite well. So the question is, what is this task similar to? Is it a matter of looking at an image and identifying objects? If it's object recognition and location, tons of work has been done around, for example, self-driving cars. So, the algorithms have been there, the models that work well are more or less known. Is it a question of image segmentation, understanding which sections of the image are there, what each element belongs to? Again, this is also something that's been studied in different domains. So what they were able to do is, based on existing products and existing research, take a baseline, let's say the currently known best practice of working with these types of image processing tasks, and build on that with some minimal fine-tuning to meet the requirements they had, right, in terms of adjusting it to the images and giving reliable enough predictions for this case. So that was also something I very much appreciate in their work. Stand really on the shoulders of giants here. We know, as I said, AI really is not that new already. There's a lot that's known about different tasks. And if you take and seek out those examples which are similar to your work, you can already start with quite a high baseline. Right, so that is the second story in our journey. And I'm going to dive into these types of questions just a bit more. right, of how do we actually um, use product thinking to help guide those decisions around how we build the AI system. So one category of questions we have is this question even feasible? Right? I've tried to elegantly avoid the question of when we should use AIs in different projects. So that's probably a topic for another talk. But even if you hypothesize that it could be good, there's no guarantee. You know, no one's done COVID diagnosis from chest X-rays. Will it work? Will it not work? I don't know. Then, of course, let's say you get it working, but the output here is not necessarily easy to predict or necessarily deterministic in, let's say, a predictable way. So maybe your predictions will be 80% accurate or 90% accurate or 99% accurate. How do you decide what is good enough and what is useful for your specific application? And then there's a question of how much time do you spend actually adjusting all these things, training or retraining or rebuilding the data versus being able to develop quickly and have fast iteration and learning cycles from it. So these are all kind of really questions when you get into the nitty-gritty of working with AI-powered products. So for some of these questions, we talked to another colleague that has worked with a project here that we are bringing to you from the United States this time. Okay, so this was several years ago, and the challenge or the situation here deals with what are called advanced placement exams. So these are taken by millions of high school students every year, and these exams are then graded, and they can have quite a bit of an impact on, let's say, their college acceptance or their future path in life. What's the challenge? Well, every year there's about 5 million of these exams that are taken. And then you need people to properly grade them consistently and being able to process that data in a timely way. So first question, like, can we even do that? Can we train an AI system to grade exams similarly to a human? All right, and these are not multiple choice exams that you can just quickly automate, right? We want long form answers. They can be several paragraphs at a time. So you need to be able to extract the meaning and work with that. It's also quite a sophisticated use of our AI technology. So what do we do as product thinkers when we're faced with this question in a novel challenge? Right? So in this case, our answers are, let's do a proof of concept. Let's do a small test. And we can see, with, let's say, a very basic test, what kind of results we get. And then, with some help from our data scientists and the expert, be able to extrapolate and make assumptions about how we can actually improve the output we get and decide if it's good enough to keep investing in and assume that it will solve our problem. All right, next, there's this trade-off we mentioned, right? This discussion on like how much time do we spend improving the training, the data, adjusting the different parameters, etc., to improve the output and the quality of our predictions. And in this case, I think one of the most interesting conclusions or most interesting tips that I discovered in exploring these projects is a brilliant flash of product thinking. So if we build on the concept we saw before of having one-on-ones with your key stakeholders and everyone that's involved in the process, this team, they made a new persona based not on one of the end users of the system, but on people involved in the training process of the AI. Right? So part of the value chain of delivering AI is exactly this, people that deal with this question, right? How much do we spend on how do we refine the training and the adjustment of the parameters versus the business value we're expected to deliver? What does it mean when you apply this product approach to the people that are contributing to the AI, not just consuming it? So I have to make a decision, right? I can possibly retrain my model for a few hours or sometimes even a few days to improve the quality of my predictions, I can also adjust different parameters to get different improvements. Now, if this is very much a business decision, right? How much do I spend on training and adjusting versus the speed I need for publishing, deploying, iterating, and learning from my product. But in most projects, it's not actually something a business person can do, right? Because then you need your software engineers, your data engineers to dig into the code, adjust the parameters, restart the whole thing, etc. So when you want to facilitate this decision-making for them, in this case, they actually made a tool, an interface where these personas, okay, these actual administrators / trainers, could make these decisions themselves and apply them without needing intervention in the code. And this was a brilliant solution to help surface those kinds of decisions and help everyone take an active role in figuring out, this path of how do we ensure the best value out of our AI system. Now, this case also had another upshot after deployment. Okay? So basically the same basis of tools could then be used to monitor the system, to make adjustments based on the actual data that we're seeing in the wild, etc., which is also, as many of you know, some of the challenges of the other challenges associated with AI when it deals with data that maybe you weren't expecting. How do you respond to that, etc. So this was like treating this as a persona, as an excellent application of product thinking to meet these challenges in the world of AI. One last thing that we saw in this project was kind of also extending another thing we do as product thinkers. Once we start a project, we want to define our measures of success, right, on the output. How will we know this product or this system is actually delivering the benefit that we're expecting from it? And in this project, they extended that and also defined measures of quality on the input. Right? So it's not just asking whatever data I have, let's see what I can get out of it. Working through this pipeline from the end back to the start, you can define what is the quality of data I need, what is the structure, what is the completeness, what is the type of variation I need to see in there, so that I can be confident that I'm training a valid system. Okay? And this also connects a bit to the concept of data mesh that we were discussing before. So quite a lot of learnings when we really dive into the day-to-day details of working with an AI system, right? But applying our product thinking here, thinking of personas, thinking of our measures of quality and measures of success, doing our proofs of concept, this can actually give us quite a big boost in working through that. So that was an excellent series of investigations really I had here. And of course, I haven't forgotten the big question of data. And data, well, I think my colleagues here in the previous talks have actually made this a bit easier for us. So continuing from this last thing we mentioned, when we define this measure, these measures of quality, this criteria for what I need in terms of data to train and deploy an effective AI system, I'm basically defining requirements, right? What do I need my data to look like? And the next step, of course, is to think of that data as a product. Okay, oh, it looks like this is not loading. I'll try this again. Okay. Okay, I'll try reloading. In any case, well, it's it's not a problem. This kind of thinking is, of course, something that facilitates, first of all, our work with data and addresses one of the biggest challenges. So by some estimates, some people will have told me that about 80% of the effort spent on developing AI-powered products is spent on the data, structuring it, cleaning it, defining what it needs to be. When new data comes in, how do you adapt that to the pipeline? How do you retrain the model, etc. So this is once you think of data as a product, okay, and you have the principles that we apply to every digital product working with your data, 80% of that problem goes away, right? Because now you'll have a pipeline that will take your incoming data, structure it, process it the way you need it, deploy that data into your system. I'm now a consumer of the data. I tell through these requirements exactly what I need. And I forget about all the implementation behind it. Okay? So I'll have a data product feeding me exactly what I need. That data product has SLAs, as we discussed before. It has observability, so we know, is it working well? Is it not? Can I do something about it? I can easily explore and discover this data. And all this is exactly discovered in the data mesh. So the last story here, I'll just try loading this slide up once again. Okay, well, it's not there, but one of the other examples that we've worked with quite recently is with ImmoScout. So this was mentioned in the talk earlier by Christine, Iska, and Fatima. Okay, so in work with them, there are of course many, as a real estate marketplace, there's a huge amount of data coming around and a lot of metrics. So one of our projects was actually concerned with building one of these dashboards to help inform decisions and actions. And as you can imagine, there are many different data sources, many transformations and updates you have to do on the data itself. And initially the project started off as a series of experiments, proof of concept, but when it's scaled, suddenly if you want to add a metric or adjust the formula for a metric, or let's say change how something is calculated or displayed, suddenly you had to go into hundreds, if not thousands of lines of code, figure out where it was, and hope that it didn't break anything else when you change something. Okay, and basically transforming this into a product, the way we work with the regular application, we were able to modularize the code into small pieces relevant for each domain. We're able to make it testable, easy to iterate on, and easier to scale. Okay, so that is not necessarily an AI example, but the same principle applies for AI. And if we go back to our very first story with Shimoku, remember they work with e-commerce, with small, medium businesses. Small, medium businesses, how do they work with AI, if they don't necessarily even have too many technical experiences, people to work on, especially data engineering, etc. Their approach is to bring exactly that. Okay? They will help you build a data product, okay, with the existing data you have, automate and simplify, abstract away all the things that you need, and ultimately give you something that feeds into one of their pre-built or easily adjustable AI models. Okay? And that is, I think, one very elegant solution to one of the biggest challenges we're seeing in all different types of AI products. So, if we in the near future are asked to work with AI or drive projects with AI at the core, AI as a contributing factor, my conclusion so far from this is one of the important things to keep in mind in all the challenges we face is to use our product thinking head. Right? So AI-powered products are still software products. So focusing on that customer experience with the personas, being able to iterate quickly and learn, make decisions. This applied to AI tackles these specific challenges of AI. So, for that challenge of how do we figure out the details in the models, you build on existing examples. How do we work with the data and make sure it meets our needs? And you define your measures of success, but also upfront define your measures of quality on the input you're getting. I'll remind you again, this is maybe one of my favorites, thinking of personas that are not just the end users application, everyone that is needed to contribute to that value chain of delivering AI, and treating the data itself as a product. And this, I think, was presented beautifully in the data mesh talk a little earlier today. So these are a few tastes of what real work with AI looks like. I'm very excited also to keep diving into this and learning from the experiences and questions of the people in this group and the things we'll be exploring very much in the future. So I wanted to thank especially the people that contributed to the talk and shared all these stories with us so that we could learn and make better products. And I'm looking forward to connecting and learning more. So that's the talk for today.
Thank you, Guy. That was a great introduction to AI-led products or product-led AI. Thanks a lot. Are there any questions from people in there? Please feel free to pause them. Also, Gabe and Ezra are still like answering all the questions we couldn't answer before in the chat. They're just back from lunch, so now they keep up answering all those different questions. For me, a question you started in terms with on this product thinking slide. You started to mention about feasibility and team elements. Just like if you could elaborate a little bit more in terms of feasibility, like how would you assess that? Because I think it's a black box you might open and you don't know how fast you are, how many resources you need. Like how do you approach that, and what would help you to make those assessments up front? I think technology in general is hard to assess up front, but it seems like it just becomes even more complex.
So, I mean, some things are not hard to assess. So if we look at our more well-known software products, if you show me, for example, wireframes of a mobile application or a web app, we probably have a good enough basis to be able to estimate, is it feasible, how long will it take, etc. And many elements of AI-powered products, are similar because all the customer flow feeding into the AI and the predictions that come out are still there. They're still the same. The specific challenge with AI is that I can't just assess feasibility based on a wireframe, right? And someone comes to me and says, I have these photos, or I have these chest x-rays. How good is it going to be in predicting COVID-19? How long is it going to take to get a good prediction? How much data will I need? And a priori, you have almost no way of answering those questions unless you try it out. And you can try, in this case, for example, in the case of COVID-19, they started with just over 5,000 images of chest x-rays. Is that enough to train the system? I don't know. So the first step is what we mentioned before, is proofs of concept. The thing that's been, that we've seen is able to accelerate and give us answers to that question of feasibility is just comparing it to similar projects. So that's one answer we saw before, and that was also applied in the COVID case. Another thing, which has become more and more accessible, especially in the past 2 or 3 years, is actually using pre-trained models. So like you don't need to be Google or Facebook with billions or trillions of photos training these super sophisticated models. Many pre-trained models that already have, let's say, some basis of image processing, natural language processing, etc. Those are things you can take as, let's say, baselines for your task. And then that accelerates not only the development process, but you can actually take them and build a little proof of concept, which is based on a whole lot more data than you would normally have. And then you can see, like, will it work or not?
So it's once more like what we heard already in other talks, like look how you get fast to have the value and really see what's the value you can have in there, like what's the customer value, and then also the budget you have. And the faster you are to deliver that value, the more likely you see if it's possible, and you see, what you get back to it. So there's not much upfront planning, but it's really like try to get to the value fast.
Yeah.
Okay. There's another question in the chat, like, as it's a new field and like not everybody has experience with AI in the team, like how do you build a team and the expertise around that?
So one question actually I ask everyone that I was talking to and researching this talk and the different projects I work on, or at least collaborate with, is very similar to this, right? So in this talk, for example, I learned that we can apply our product thinking to AI questions, and AI practitioners can apply product thinking to accelerate their processes. But then, if not everyone has this experience and you're building a team, should you choose strong product people, and help them learn or adapt to the world of AI, or should you work with strong AI, machine learning, data engineering people or data scientists and help them learn the the specific product thinking tips that could help them make a valuable product? I got, I think, 700 different answers, mostly contradictory. Let's say like my summary of what I've heard so far is that it's not a question of which team members you have or which capabilities you have. So there's no, like, you can't really compromise on product thinking and the relevant level of data and AI expertise. So some AI systems, some AI projects are not too complicated, right? You can actually, especially with the tools that make it easy, the pre-built models, existing examples, you can build something out of the box with limited AI technical knowledge, but that product knowledge is always relevant. The moment you want to adjust and optimize and scale your AI, then those technical skills are crucial. So every team will have a different mix of software engineers and engineers specialized in machine learning and or data. But that product role is always there. I think that's the clearest direction I found so far.
So it's like starting small, and then over time you just build the expertise, and you increase the complexity, and as it will scale, you just build up your expertise here. Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for being here with us, sharing all those different use cases with AI and giving the talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.